Welcome back. This is the last few slides in Chapter 1 of Organizational Behavior. So the situational perspective tells us this. Right? Most organizational situation outcomes are influenced by other variables, which means it's very difficult to find two situations the same. So when people ask you, what should I do in this case? When this happens, what should I do? Often the answer is right here. It depends. It depends on what? It depends on a lot of things. It depends on the situation. It depends on the time pressures. It depends on the leader. It depends on the workers. It depends on the customer, right? It depends. Right? So when we learn about things in this book, we're going to learn about like different motivational techniques because, you guessed it, it depends. Sometimes one works better than others. What's the best way to motivate employees? What's the best way to lead employees? What is your leadership style? The answer is it depends. What does it depend on? It depends on the situation. If it's an emergency, I'm going to be very directive and give orders. If it's a complex solution with a lot of times, I might use a different style. Rather than just giving orders, I'm going to ask for input. We're going to compare the different concepts. Maybe do the pluses and minuses. We could do a SWOT analysis. We'll talk about what that is later, right? And so again, it depends. So it depends on the situation. It depends on the people in that situation. Right? The opposite of that is the universal model. The universal model assumes cause and effect, which means you do this, this happens. I touch the hot stove, I burn my finger, it hurts. That's direct cause and effect linkage. The problem with that is people react differently. Different people react differently in different situations. Or the same people react differently in different situations. And sometimes, just to make it difficult, the same people react differently in the same situations. Right? We've learned about a couple things with the Hawthorne experiments where the science just didn't explain what was going on. They thought there was a direct cause and effect between the lights getting brighter and the teenage girls turning out more work. Turns out, not the lights. It was the other factors involved. Right? So these complexities of human behavior and the settings in which they happen make universal conclusions virtually impossible. Right? The management class would be a lot shorter if there was one way to do everything. One best organization, one best style of leadership, all of that. But what's the fun in that, right? So we're going to learn different styles, and the trick is to figure out, right, which one to use in which situation. So think of this as a toolbox. In my toolbox, I have a hammer, I have a saw, I have a screwdriver, I have an electrical meter, right? I have to pull out the right tool for the right job. When I try to hammer a screw, it doesn't go in so well, right? I need a screwdriver to drive a screw. So part of it is recognizing what tools you have, but also recognizing what the situation calls for, right? And that comes from experience, that comes from practice. So in our book, we have our book divided into different parts on the next slide. So we're going to talk about environmental factors that you will find. We'll talk about chapters 3 through 6, individual factors for the people in the organization. Then we'll talk sort of about group dynamics and group factors, and then we're going to talk some about leadership. And then part 5, we're going to talk about the organization itself. Right, so here's kind of a breakdown of some of the things we're going to talk about dealing with to be a manager and to work in an organization and have organization and understand organizational behavior. So over here we have some why do individuals do what we do what they do. We'll talk about individual values. We're going to talk about motivation and various things that drive the individuals. Over here we're going to talk about groups. We'll talk about groups and teams. How does teamwork happen? Decision making, problem solving, conflict and negotiation. We'll talk about a number of those skills that you need in a group setting. Down here we'll talk about leadership, different leadership approaches, the traditional approaches, the modern approaches. We'll talk a little about power, influence, politics. Right? And over here, how do organizational characteristics influence effectiveness? So we'll talk about different organizational structures, how to design an organization, the organizational culture inside that structure, change management, how to change things in an organization, right? All that stuff kind of goes together here in the middle, right? What makes managers and organizations effective, right? How we can enhance their performance, how we can enhance their commitment to the organization and its goals. Right? What kind of behaviors do we want out of them? Right? And minimizing dysfunctional behavior means how can we minimize the bad behaviors, the disruptive things that might happen that would help, that would sort of work against us from achieving our organizational goals. Right, so this concludes chapter 5. Now we move on to, this concludes chapter 1. This is chapter 1. Now we'll move on to chapter 2.